Hey, everybody, before we get into today's episode, I want to just bring you up to speed. You're going to hear an episode today that's quite phenomenal with Del Bigtree. He is one of the voices and a lot of the work behind what we're seeing happening and the change that's happening with the immunizations across the board in our nation. We interviewed him just probably 2 months ago, and between our interview and what you're going to hear today, so much has happened. The night that we interviewed him, he got the news that the CDC was going to remove the statement that says that immunizations do not cause autism. That came down that night. In addition to that, Hep B, which you're going to hear him talk about in this interview, Hep B has come off the recommendations for infants. We've gone from 72 recommended immunizations for our children down to 11. 55 of them have been removed. All of this has happened since this interview, and you're going to hear the backstory of a lot of the information and why I believe this is happening. It's a fascinating story. There's a documentary he's going to talk about, and you're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what's been going on and why you're seeing an explosion of change. You're going to love this interview, so let's lean in and be informed. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. I am not just excited about this interview. I'm actually honored to be having this discussion. Del Bigtree is joining me today. Del is a preeminent voice in the MAHA movement. He's the CEO and founder of ICAN. He has been the communications lead for RFK and his whole movement in the presidential campaign. He's got a background behind him that is just absolutely impressive. What I'm excited about for you is that you get to hear his story. You get to hear where the passion came from. You get to hear his background, and you get to hear where it led. But you're also going to hear some statistics that are pretty compelling, and they're going to cause you to really lean in. This is a challenging one. It's a challenging one for a lot of us. However, the conversation is powerful. It's going to be longer than usual. I don't think you're going to want to stop. You're going to want to hear to the end. So I'm just asking you to lean in. Listen hard, think well, be curious, and let's see where this conversation goes. I know this. You're about to be informed, so let's dig in. Hey, Del, thanks so much for being on. I'm thrilled that we get to bring this information to this audience. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me, Suzanne. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Well, I've been following you for a while, watching your work for a while, but a few weeks ago, I got to sit with you in person in a small environment and listen to just the story behind what we're really going to ultimately be talking about, which is this new documentary. But part of what I loved with you sharing is just what your background is and how you got to this. I think it's fascinating, and I think it's an important part of the story, really. So will you just start with that, share a little bit about you?
Yeah, when people ask me, like, how did you get into this, or how did you get into this mess you find yourself in?
Yeah, right.
I'd like to say my parents are a huge part of it. I think parenting is the most important job we're ever going to do in this world. And I was really one of those people that was very lucky to have incredibly conscious parents. Mm-hmm. My mother especially took parenting very, very seriously, and they were way outside of the box. You know, my mom decided, in the very beginning not to vaccinate me. My father was, when I was first born, he ended up becoming a minister, but they were on a spiritual journey path together at that time too. My father became a minister when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, something like that. But they were deeply involved in a connection to God. And I was raised from the very moment I was born to really think about the idea that I am created in the image and likeness of God, and that the things that I do, I have to ask, am I defiling that opportunity, or am I bringing benefit? And so my parents were also, hippies from the 1960s, not really the drug smoking ones, but the freedom fighting,
right.
First Amendment right to free speech, was a huge part of what I was raised in. But what they would say to us, I was the oldest of three. My sister's in the middle, and I have a little brother, Shad. And they would tell us almost on a daily basis, you are here to change the world. You're going to make the world a better place.
So powerful.
It's very powerful. And they would say, your connection to God, there's no one that comes between that connection. There's no teacher. There's no politician. There's nothing. You have got to learn to connect and say, is this feel right with me and God, and move through your life that way. And so they taught me to pray and to connect. And so that's, how we got started. They still had put me in school. And then I always like to tell this story. I was in third grade, I believe it was, and I was walking to school. We lived about 5 blocks from school in Boulder, Colorado. Back when you could let your kids walk
I was going to say 5 blocks
to
is too far now,
arresting the parents.
Right.
It's just like
Right.
such a different world. My little sister, I think she was in kindergarten, so we would walk to school together, and then we'd come back for lunch. My mom didn't want us eating the lunch food, and she also wanted connection with us all the time. And I came back one day, and I wasn't wearing the same shirt. She said, what happened to the shirt you wore to school? And I still remember it. I had, in art class, made this T-shirt. We had done batik dyeing, where you put wax on the shirt, and then you dye it. And I managed, in the process, to spell the name of my gymnastics team, the Flyers. And so I wore it to school all proud, and I came back at lunch, and I wasn't wearing it. My mom said, why? I said, oh, Craig said it looked stupid, and he lives right next door to the school, so I just went and borrowed a T-shirt from him. And I never saw that school again.
That was the end of that.
That was the end of that. My mom pulled my sister and I out of school immediately, and she said to us, I am not raising kids that care what other people think. You believed in that shirt when you walked out the door, and someone made you, hurt your confidence.
Awesome.
And that was it. Like, we were going to be confident, powerful beings, connected to God and doing the work that we do. And I always say to people when I tell that story, if you raise your child like that, be careful. They could end up in as much trouble as I find myself in now.
Well, I love it, because really my life work has been about being intentional. Be intentional with your parenting, being intentional with your walk with the Lord. And really, even, we've started a couple of schools, not because I liked school. I didn't like education myself. I didn't like it myself. Yeah. But for the purpose of helping parents be able to step back for a minute and know their child and know how their child learned, and, go out of the box in order to really, understand how their child is designed and help them make the decisions that are right for them, their life. So I love that story.
Yeah. And, otherwise, I'm not sure why we're having kids. If you're going to have kids and you're going to have a nanny raise them and then send them to a school where the public school system is going to try and teach them that as an individual, they're not as important as the collective, and we're seeing the results of that collectivist thinking in our nation now. But what, I would just say to anyone, what interactions do you have with your children? How many are there? Are you getting the majority of their attention, or is someone else? Are they raising themselves, or their friends raising them? All those things matter. At least I think they do. I don't know the Del Bigtree that wasn't nurtured, right? I don't know how much of it's my own nature. I honestly, I question this at times, to be honest. Am I a moral and ethical person by nature, or was it just my parents' influence and training in me made me care about people and want to help children and do the work that I do? I feel passionate about it. It feels core to me, but I don't think I could win that argument. I wouldn't know how to debate that, because I had such intentionality.
Okay, so fast forward. Now you are the producer, correct, on the show Doctors. I love this part of your story about, I think what you said is your mom would call. So will you tell a little bit, forward. Yeah. Now your career-wise, what are you doing, and where do you find yourself career-wise?
I left, I wanted to make movies, and I don't know if my parents wanted me to be a minister. I felt like I had a different calling. I wanted a big audience. I wanted to reach film and television audiences. So eventually, it took a long time actually, but I ended up, my big break was producing. I was a field producer originally on the Dr. Phil show, and then Dr. Phil created the Doctors television show with his son. the first medical talk show of its time of its kind, and I ended up being a producer. The producer would be an executive.
Okay.
I produced one episode every week. If you imagine, there's
Okay.
Monday
Yeah.
through Friday. I was one of 7 producers, and my job was to book all the guests and all the stories for an entire episode. And every week I'd have to make a new episode. And so I was very high rated on the show. I would like to say I was one of the highest rated producers, meaning my shows tended to get very high ratings and would be, put up for Emmys and sweeps and things like that. But my mom would call and say, I don't understand, what are you doing working on a medical talk show? You've never been to a doctor in your life. I wasn't on top of, all the
No
intentional
vaccines,
parenting,
but
no
we don't.
vaccines. We didn't go to doctors. My mom believed that God made our bodies to heal. You just have to nourish it. On a rare occasion, if I really wiped out hard skiing or something was messed up, we might see a chiropractor. And that was about the only interactions we had. So here I am, not just talking about medicine, I'm celebrating science and medicine, and it was really kind of funny. I said, I don't know, Mom. This is the opportunity that's come to me. I actually really fell in love with it. I really enjoyed working on that show. And I was challenging the system from the inside. It was the biggest medical talk show, but I wasn't, most of my peers were, doing the latest drug or vaccine or how to put your makeup on and things. And I was like, this drug just got recalled. I want to do a story. Why? How long was it on the market before we found out why?
Envelope.
How many lies were there told? How do they hide it? What did the court case? So, and my executives honestly did not get it. They didn't get that I was like really challenging the system. All they knew was I was getting huge ratings.
That's
and
so fascinating, though, isn't it?
I would do like I remember when the Cleveland Clinic brought chiropractic into the Cleveland Clinic, medical mall and made that something that they could offer. I was like, this is a big story. Or a doctor using, acupuncture instead of anesthesia. So just always pushing the envelope there. And but eventually I think as we get along in the story, looking back now, it was all a part of my destiny. I was being trained for something. But I will say there was a moment when I was reading a medical journal on a very complicated story, and I was sort of, you ever step outside of yourself, and I'm just reading it, I'm like, I can't believe I even understand this. Like, this is really, I get it. I'm excited about it. I'm going to try to figure out how to take this very complicated medical story and help the audience understand it. And I remember in the moment laughing and thinking, I wish I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self that thought he was going to be the next Steven Spielberg, actually, you're going to be reading medical journals for a living and explaining science and medicine to humanity. I never would have believed it, but I really fell in love with it. And somehow I didn't think of myself as smart, but when I was there, suddenly I was into something I cared about, and
it made sense.
names, and it made sense, and it was sticking. And I joked that I probably would have ended up going to medical school if I'd have been born into any other family on the planet. I was like Wayne Gretzky, born in Africa. Just there was no ice around. I was never going to learn to skate. I was never going to get near doctors. So
you
it
weren't
wasn't
going
on
that route.
It wasn't
right.
on that route. But instead, so I do. Now I work with lots of doctors, lots of scientists. I'm deeply involved, obviously from a slightly different perspective, but I am just absorbed by this creation and what it's capable of and what it can withstand and how we should treat it.
I think it's so fascinating. I'm just, I understand that from the standpoint of I really did not love school. I was fine. I did okay. I didn't get it. I'm like, why are we memorizing? It just, there was no meaning really to it.
I was the same way. Yeah.
And
checked out mostly just wanted the social experience.
Yeah, the social
Sports
thing.
is great. Choir, I love choir, but
it's at one point I thought I think I'm going to be a special ed teacher. This was way back, probably going into my senior year of high school. And a teacher told me I was tutoring highly disabled children, and I was doing a great job and loved it. And one of the teachers at that school said, don't do it. You're going to get too emotionally attached and you'll never see change. And it was one of those things where I was so jarred by it, like maybe she sees something in me that this isn't going to work out. And went a different route,
Yeah.
loved what I did. And then, several years later, I'm sort of looking at, people homeschool. That's really cool. I would never do that. And then I end up opening hybrid homeschools.
Wow.
But how God brought me back
Yeah.
around, there was something about reaching children or reaching the family that made sense to me. And so I relate to that. Just God's got his way. Like, you're not going to thwart his plan.
God's plan is so much better than the one I had for myself.
Yeah. So that's it. I love the story. And so bring us a little bit fast forward now from doctor. Then what starts to happen? Because I think it's important to know that next step.
So I'm working on the doctor's television show. I'm doing very controversial stories. And I got a call from a doctor I'd worked with on a story that was very complex. And the year earlier, he had said to me while we were working on the story, "You probably shouldn't have me on your show." I was like, "Oh, why?" He's like, "Well, if you look me up online, they call me a quack." I was like, "Well, why is that?" He's like, "Well, I'm one of these doctors that believes that vaccines are causing autism." And I was like, "Oh. Well," I was like, "This story has nothing to do with that." He's like, "Yeah, I know. I just don't want to undermine." I was like, "I'll worry about that." And so we did the show. Really, it's too complex to get into now. But it was really incredible. And then he said to me while working on it, "Would you ever cover this story of vaccines and autism?" Now, remember, I'm not vaccinated at the moment. So it's not like, I just didn't, it wasn't like I carried it as a thing. It was just how I was raised. It just was. But I said, we've covered that topic. It didn't go well. It's a famous episode where Travis Stork, our lead doctor, really kind of loses it with Jenny McCarthy, and it was like a whole deal.
Yeah. Here we go.
So I was like, I probably can't go near it. But I said, look, if anything really changes, this show is pro-vaccine, but since you're in that space, if anything ever really changes, give me a call and I'll take a look at it. And so a year later, he calls and says, "Remember when you said there was something big that was going to happen?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, there's a whistleblower inside the CDC named Dr. William Thompson that's going to come forward in about 2 weeks. The story's going to come out, and he's claiming they've committed scientific fraud on the MMR autism study and several other vaccine studies, but specifically that one." And so I was like, okay, wow. Pitched it to my executive producers. It was one of the few stories ever. They said, "Are you crazy? We are not going to say the CDC has got bad science or is somehow committing fraud on studies, and they're a friend of the show's." And so I was like, okay. And I left, and almost at the same time period, I was curious about that story. I had my team, I have a team around. I was like, just keep tracking this Dr. William Thompson. Sure enough, like 2 weeks later, these recorded interviews start coming out of this guy from the CDC saying, "I can't believe we did what we did. We hid statistically significant information. Every time I see a child with autism, I feel guilty." I was like, what is going on here? I really wanted to be a part of that story, and I watched it being censored. I watched someone on iReport on CNN. They don't even have it anymore, but where regular citizens could post stories they cared about, and there it was, whistleblower from the CDC, and then it was taken down within minutes.
And this was way back.
This is 2015.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, okay, no one
wants to touch this.
No one wants this story anywhere. And then at the same moment, this is really important, I think, because I probably would have let it go, even though I'm not vaccinated. This is an issue I care about. It's interesting. There's a whistleblower saying vaccines aren't good. And then I get a call. We're probably a few weeks in. I get a call from my executive producers, and they're like, "Come over to the stage. We're going to tape a episode that's going into one of your shows. You lost a guest that dropped out, so we're going to just put this piece in because it's airing tomorrow, so you're going to have to edit it really quick." So I run over. We're at Paramount Studios. I run over to the sound stage, and I'm sitting backstage with a pen and paper ready to really be able to move this thing and finish it quickly. And out onto the stage walks Senator Richard Pan. This is California in Hollywood. This is the senator that was bringing onto the show, as far as I know, the first time he was ever going to publicly talk about this bill, SB 277, that was going to force vaccinate every kid in California. You would not be allowed to go to school without vaccinate with all of your vaccinations. And so I'm sitting there and just thinking, oh my God, I can't have this be in my show. My name
On
can't
that.
go on this. I mean, that's all I was thinking at first. Just what, this guy's the end of the world as I know it. I mean, I have a baby at this point. I'm not going to vaccinate my baby. As I've said, I haven't had any of these things. And this guy is like the end of the world that I was raised in and wants to make that illegal. And so, first thing, I ran right over to the executive producers and I said, that was like, I only have like a 2-minute hole in my show. That's like 10 minutes. You don't want to cut it down that much. And they're like, yeah, you're right. We'll put it in someone else's show. So I dodged that.
You like
bullet.
dodged, yeah.
But then a couple of weeks went by, and I was really starting. We kept having this guy on the show. All the doctors were talking about this great law that's going to force vaccinate all the kids. And I suddenly did not feel at home anymore. It didn't feel like this was the place for me. And I wanted to figure out that whistleblower story. Like, I wanted to tell that story. And so one day it got so like overwhelming, my frustration and
it's just
feeling
going against
trapped,
everything in you.
that I'm sitting in my office and I sat on my couch and I just prayed, which wasn't a normal occurrence. I mean, I usually keep that to home in church, but I just said, God, I feel like I'm supposed to be telling this whistleblower story. Like, I feel like this is exactly the type of movie I should be making. And I think I should be working to stop SB 277 that I think is going to poison God's children. And here I am on the one job that I'm very grateful for. I have a home. It took a long time to have this career. I'm grateful. But I'm in the one place I can't go near any of these stories. Please give me a sign. What am I supposed to do here? Said amen. And 30 seconds later, my phone rings in my office. And I walk over and I pick it up, and it's a publicist, and she says, hi, Del, this is Donna. I was like, hi, Donna. She says, do you know who Dr. Andrew Wakefield is? And I said, yes. I mean, this is the big doctor out of England that first connected vaccines to autism that they always say is a fraud. And that's going on my mind. I didn't say it to her. I said, yeah, I know who he is. And she said, would you like to meet him? And I mean, I'm like, okay, there's signs.
The timing.
I was like,
okay.
yeah, Don, I not only do I want to,
maybe I should.
I'm supposed to be meeting him. And she says, well, because it's going to be a very small party, I got to know if you're going to be there because someone else won't get invited. I was like, Donna, if you knew when you just called me, you would know I would skip a family wedding right now to be at that meeting. And so it was 2 days later. I go to this backyard parties, like 50 people there. I find Andy's wife, and I say hi. My wife's with me, and we're saying hi, and she calls Andy over. And look, I didn't know what I was there for. I didn't know what he was there for. And I didn't know if he was a fraud or not. But I knew, obviously, I'm supposed to meet him. And he's the type of person, since this story's always been around him, I want to meet him. Like, I'll know as soon as so he comes over within, I mean, I don't know if you've ever met Andy Wakefield, but it takes about 60 seconds before you realize this is one of the most brilliant, most compassionate, unbelievable scientific minds you've ever met. Humble. Wow, whatever happened to this guy, that's the fraud. The fraud is calling this guy a fraud. Like, I can tell this is a sincere, well-intentioned person. So he's talking about SB 277. We're chatting and annoying the whole party. Like, I'm not even paying attention. They're all like gathered around. I'm trying to figure out what it is I'm supposed to be getting from this moment, this story. Yeah. And then somebody walks up after 30 minutes like, Andy, you got to do your pitch. And he's like, oh, sorry, Del, I've got to go do my pitch. I was like, whatever that means. And so he walks and gets on this little box in the backyard, and he talks about SB 277. We've got to stop this law. Vaccines, they've never done the proper safety science, and this is my life's work now, and I get attacked, but I don't care. And he says, but the thing that I'm doing to work on this and to really make a difference is I've been working on a documentary about a whistleblower inside the CDC named Dr. William Thompson. I've been working on it for a year and a half, and I mean,
Did you almost just
right there
fall out?
You can't explain with them. It's like in the movie where like they do that focus pull and the whole background kind of moves behind you, and the clouds part, and a beam of sunshine comes down on only you. Like it felt that profound. I'm like, oh my God, he's making the documentary I just prayed I wanted to be a part of. Like, oh my God. I mean, you can't call that a coincidence. Make your
If
best
you
attempt.
believe in him. I don't,
Make
right?
your best attempt to call that a coincidence, because it's the craziest. And I just remember thinking, as I was standing, I was like, okay, Del, you know those people that come up to you and they're like, I had a tarot card reading and we were supposed to work together, or I had a dream about you, and you're just like, and I just thought, don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a scientist. He doesn't care about any prayer that you've said. Be chill. But I knew I'm going to work with this guy, and so I did. And the miracles kept coming, and we ended up, I spent a year working on that film with him, which ended up being called Vaxxed, From Cover Up to Catastrophe. And that catapulted me into the limelight of this vaccine safety conversation. And that film, I think many people credit that with igniting the medical freedom movement around the world, which I think is now sort of morphed into MAHA and the work with Robert Kennedy Jr. But that was transferred. And that film really was about MMR and autism, and we traveled the country for a year. It had
testimonies.
Testimonies, thousands. We had a bus where people were writing the names of their injured children on the bus. All of it still stands as a monument to a vaccine injury. And then we got, again, some help from God. We got kicked out of the Tribeca Film Festival after being accepted. And then even Robert De Niro, who started the festival, came out to defend the film, but turned his back on us at the last minute, which made this media hyperstorm broke out. Every major newspaper was talking about Vax, this horrible film that's going to get children killed. And, I mean, they couldn't stop. And the more they attacked us, the longer the lines were down the block.
More people were coming.
Everywhere we went. And so that was God's advertising. And, when God's
His ways
involved
are
like
higher,
that,
right?
you just get out of the way and just duck a little bit.
That's amazing. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit MAHA.
Yeah.
Let's one more thing, and then I want to actually get into the documentary.
Yeah.
But so the MAHA movement, your involvement in that, how that happened, what that looked like for you, a couple of little stories there, and then we'll move into the documentary.
After Vaxxed, I started my own nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. I started my own weekly talk show called the HighWire. People can watch it at highwire.com every Thursday. And we had a legal team. I brought in one of the, I think, who will go down as the greatest constitutional attorney of all times, Aaron Siri, because there's liability protections around vaccines. You can't sue the manufacturers. I wanted to know how they establish safety on all the childhood vaccines, because as I traveled with Vaxxed, we were just doing, like I said, 1,000 interviews of parents of injured children. And it wasn't just MMR. It wasn't just autism. It was every vaccine caused some horrible reaction in some children. So how had they determined these vaccines were safe? And so we started suing the government and winning. Since we couldn't sue the manufacturer, we're going to sue the government that's protecting them. So we won against FDA, CDC, NIH, HHS. And while we were doing that, we got the attention of Robert Kennedy Jr., who had his own nonprofit. And he was doing similar work. And so we teamed up on a couple of lawsuits and things like that. And then actually in end of 2018, maybe early 2019, I sat Bobby down and I said, we've made a lot of headway on this conversation about the lack of proper safety science around vaccines, but we're starting to be censored, and I'm concerned they're going to close out this conversation. And I think the way around that would be we need a voice that can transcend censorship in the media and just draw attention to this conversation. So I said to Bobby, I think you should run for president of the United States. That was such an interesting evening, and he thought about it. He spent, remember, that was 2018-19, so that was over one election ago, and he ended up deciding it's just not the right time.
Not to,
and,
but considered it.
And
I mean, it caused him to pause.
And I remember saying to him, "You've probably thought about this your whole life, and there must be reasons you haven't done it, but this is my thinking." And he said, I want to correct one thing. He's like, I've never thought about it ever in my life. I never wanted it. It's not what I wanted. So anyway, in 2023, I guess, early 23, probably that winter, he called me and said, remember that idea you had? I'm thinking of doing it.
Wow.
And so I was in all the meetings as he thought about it and, challenged it from all sides, brought in friends and family, and ultimately I was his director of communications when he ran for president. And I saw him. I went through all the decisions, started as Democrats, changed to independents when we realized the Democratic Party was as corrupt as it was. And then when he joined Donald Trump, I was there for all those conversations and watched one of the greatest, I think, combinations, and two different people
And that was
come together.
iffy, right?
Very
like even
iffy.
going into that was
We
not
didn't-
was not
No.
easy.
It wasn't easy.
Right?
It wasn't easy for Bobby. They are very different in how they carry themselves, but they clearly had a similar passion about children's health, which we recognize. But the question was, would Trump follow through? Would he really give you a position that mattered? If you're going to walk away from all these people that supported you, we had the most successful independent, campaign since Ross Perot. We had gotten more signatures to get on ballots in all 50 states, which were higher numbers than had ever had to been achieved. They made them very difficult, almost impossible, and we had achieved it. And right when we'd finally gotten on the ballot in all 50 states was this opportunity. It was right after it all started, the day that the assassination attempt happened on President Trump. Bobby called him to offer condolences, and that began a conversation that will probably, as I said, be one of the greatest political shifts in history. I mean, that's what's happening now.
Oh, it's just all of it. Just such a great story to get you to this point. And I think it's important to hear the background. But let's talk about the documentary.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I was
Thank
just
you.
sharing with you. My husband and I watched it, and one Sunday afternoon after church, I'm like, let's just watch. It was a rainy day, and we didn't probably speak to each other for 2 hours after. I mean, it was, and I had heard you. I mean, I knew what it was about. I'd seen a few clips. It's really profound. And so will you share a little bit about the overall, what's it about? And then I want to get into a little bit about what you found out in it.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things that I've proved through all of our lawsuits with our nonprofit is that, and I'm still watching podcasters and even main news agencies say we're wrong about this. We're not. I've won lawsuits about it. There's never been a double-blind placebo trial to establish safety of any of the childhood vaccines we're giving our kids.
None of them.
None of them. Now they're finally admitting that, but they're adding this new caveat, which is, well, no, we didn't do this. Is what we're going to hear now, which is great. It means we're winning. We're away from them saying we're lying. That was misinformation for the last 6 or 7 years of my life. Now they're like, well, that's not technically misinformation. The current vaccines were never tested against placebos, but we can't. That would be unethical because there's already vaccines that exist. So they were tested against the previous version of the vaccine, and those versions were all tested against placebos. That's not true either. And so that's my next. I'm going to have to beat on that probably for another year.
For the next.
So that they stop even saying that, because there's no placebo in sight. None of these products have ever, not the original prototypes, none of it. They have skipped this process, which is the gold standard of safety, and that is the core part of my issue.
So will you define a double-blind study? Just what does that actually mean?
Yeah. So in case, and I was one of those guys that skipped a few biology classes in high school, but a double-blind, how you establish safety in a pharmaceutical product. Let's say you have a brand new drug. One group gets, let's say you take 10,000 people. 5,000 get the drug, the pill, and 5,000 gets placebo, which by definition is supposed to be a product that has no effect on the human body. So in the case of a pill, it's usually a sugar pill. They paint it or stamp it to look exactly like the other one. In an injectable product, like, there's injectable Enbrel and things, or a vaccine, your placebo should be a saline injection. And they say it's double-blind because neither the scientists doing the study or the patients in the study know which one they got. This is because all the scientists are being funded and paid for. They work for the drug company. Now, this is something I didn't really understand until I got deep in the investigation. I always thought the FDA or the CDC, like regulatory agencies, were doing the safety studies, kind of like crash tests. We're going to take your drug and product, and we're going to test it ourselves to see if it's safe. That's not what happens. It's the manufacturers themselves. So it's like a good faith thing. We trust that whatever science they're showing us was well done, that they didn't hide anything, which I think is problematic to begin with. But that's how it's done, and they're supposed to do this double-blind placebo trial, and then you follow. So if you're giving them a drug and they're taking it, or you're giving them vaccines, you're supposed to follow them, for at least the amount of time that the most obvious, the things you'd be concerned about would reveal themselves. So with a vaccine where you're messing with the immune system, you would want to go long enough to see if it's causing autoimmune or immune dysregulation. That's going to be one of the major problems with messing with your immune system. Well, if you have an autoimmune disease, you didn't get that overnight, whether it's multiple sclerosis or even asthma or diabetes or, eczema or psoriasis or, lupus or Crohn's disease, digestive issues. They take time to appear. So you would want the study to probably be at least 2 years long. Most drugs are 2, 5, and then sometimes 10 years long.
Okay.
And you follow both these groups, placebo group and the drug group. And when it's all over, you just ask really simple questions. Who had more cancer? Who had more diabetes? Did anyone have their mutation of their genes? Was there an autoimmune disease that popped up? And the reason you have that placebo group is so let's say 10 people ended up getting asthma in your drug group. Well, you could say that it was over 4 years, maybe 10 people on average would have gotten asthma. But then you go over to your placebo group and say, how many asthma cases were there? Same amount of people, equally matched. How many were in the placebo group? And you go, well, only 3. Oh, well, then clearly this drug is causing more asthma than not getting it, right? And that's how that works.
Okay.
That's never happened for any childhood vaccine. It happens for every drug, every cancer drug, everything we do.
What in the world?
So of all the things you're going to rush on the market, why would it be a perfectly healthy child's product? They'll hold, cancer patients will be in 4th stage cancer and say, I'd like to try that trial drug. It's like, I'm sorry.
That's right.
It's still in a safety trial. You're going to have to wait a few years. And they'll say, I'm going to be dead in a few years, and I'm willing to take the risk. I'm dying here. Sorry, safety is so important. So to put that with, but we won't have the same preciousness about safety on a product to a kid that's not dying of cancer, has no health issues whatsoever. It's really, really shocking. So anyway, that's why this movie is so important. And back when I was traveling the country with Vax in 2016, we were on this bus, like I described, and we were going to be going up through Detroit, Michigan. And someone reached out. I didn't know who they were, and they said, hi, I'm a big fan of the film. While you're in Detroit, I know the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health. Would you like to meet him? And I said, sure, that'd be fascinating. I'm assuming he's pro-vaccine and everything else. And if he's going to watch, I wanted everyone to see Vax.
Right.
I mean, that movie, by the way, is also incredible. The movie's incredible, and the personal stories in it are amazing. So I went to dinner with Dr. Marcus Zervos in 2016. Lovely dinner. He sat down, and one of the first things he said, he's like, I've watched your film. It's very compelling. But you keep saying something on this tour you're on. I've seen your YouTube videos that I take issue with. You keep saying they've never done the proper science to establish safety in any of the childhood vaccines. He said, so I sit on the biggest databases in the world, and I went to do the research to bring it to you to show you you're wrong. And he said, and I'm shocked that I have to sit across from you and tell you you're right.
And he brought that to you.
He brought that to me. He said, he'd been watching these videos and thought, I am shocked that we have never done, like I just described, never done a placebo trial on any of the childhood vaccines. And he said, now I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that vaccines aren't safe. It just means we can't say that they're safe. And I said, yet you are. Yet every television station, every doctor is saying they're safe, and they have no scientific backing for that. He's like, yeah, I see your frustration with that. He's like, but I don't know what I can do for you. I'm pro-vaccine. I said, hold on a second. You do studies at Henry Ford. Henry Ford is one of the most esteemed research centers in the world. You do studies, right? He's like, yeah. I said, would you ever do a study then that compared the health outcomes of vaccinated children with completely unvaccinated children?
Because you can't go backwards
you
and
can't
do
go
the double,
backwards.
I
can't do a placebo study.
The train's left the station.
Right.
So what can we do?
We can only do a study that looks back at people that already made this choice. I can't block someone from having a vaccine, but there's children like my children. I'd be happy to have you do a study on my children's health that are unvaccinated, and there's a lot of people like that. And so he said, sure, I would do that study. And so that was 2016. I sort of pressured him for several years. He eventually finally did the study in 2020. about.
Were you having to pressure him because was he concerned? Was he kind of
wasn't-
going back, or is it like I just don't have the time?
Just
or-
I just don't have the time.
Yeah,
It's not my priority.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to fund it for him.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it's going to get funded. I don't really know. But in 2018, I brought Aaron Seary, my lawyer, and went and met with him, and we really kind of said, "Look, you're confident in the vaccine program, right?" He's like, "Yes." And then like, there's a civil war breaking out in this country over the safety of vaccines. You could end it if you do this study and it shows the vaccinated are healthier. We're done. We'll move on. But one rule: whatever this study proves, you publish it. And he said, "Yeah, of course, I'll follow the data where it leads me." Great. And so 2020, we find out he's finished the study and he's refusing to publish it. And I was like, I called him, what's going on? The deal was you publish it. He's like, yeah, it's, at one point he said to me, Del, I'm not comfortable with ending the vaccine program. I said, what do you mean by that? I mean, you're saying that this one study could be that destructive to the vaccine program? He's like, wow. It's really bad. And I was like, well, then you have to publish. The world needs to know. He's like, he was just hemming and hawing.
Yeah.
I just kept saying, over the course of a couple of years, we were in the middle of COVID by that point. I'm like, okay, there's too much going on.
Yeah, we've got a lot going on.
Got a lot going on. But in 2022, I finally thought, let me give this one more shot. I did happen to have a speech I was giving up in Detroit. I said, I'm going to be in Detroit. You want to get dinner? He said, sure. So we went to dinner. I decided to bring hidden cameras and recording equipment with me. My assistant was with me, and we went and had dinner because I didn't know what I would do with it, but I wanted whatever was said. I wanted the truth to be known and have some proof or evidence of it. And so he sings the praises of the study. I say, is there any way you could do it better? This is all in the film. I mean, what makes the film, I think, so compelling. It'd be one thing if I was just tell a story.
Wow.
It'd be one thing to tell a story just about a study like this, but it's sitting at that dinner and hearing his you can feel his internal conflict.
100%.
The tension is palpable. He knows what the right thing to do is.
He
basically states it. I know I should be publishing this, but I can't. It'll be the end of me. It'll be the destruction of my career, and I just can't live with it. And so I got all that on camera and still had no way of publishing the study, didn't know how I could put this out. And then just this year, a few months ago, Senator Ron Johnson saw the study and said, I'm going to publish it on the Senate website as an offering to the public good, and they can't stop me from doing it. And suddenly that opened up an opportunity to tell this story that I'd been a part of since 2016, all the hidden camera footage I had. And so I was like, okay, when is the hearing? Yep. And it was like a month and a half. I was like, I need a year to make the documentary. He's like, Del, I'm not waiting that long.
Wow.
I'm doing this hearing in a month and a half. I was like, okay, well, let's make the best movie we can. And I'll tell you this. We made it probably about 2 months, a couple of weeks after we won the Malibu Film Festival with it.
Which is incredible.
Best of festival. This is another one of those moments where I think God stepped in. It would be very, very difficult to make a great documentary in 2 months the way we did. But I have a team that does a weekly talk show. When we're filmmakers, you look at differently. TV, you move faster. So I have a team that moves fast already. And having that short period of time, it kept us from going off on side tangents. Like I remember one point we're editing and we're getting into what happened in COVID, the pandemic, and finally I was like, no, hold on, whoa. We're off track. We don't have time to handle that much we can't make the movie that broad. Yeah. Let's stay focused. Let's just stay on the placebo trials, what's been done, what's the actual science, who are the best scientists to talk about this, what does this study tell us? And for that reason, I think it is a very simple, a very clear,
very
and
easy
powerful,
to understand.
very easy to understand. And a lot of people are reaching out and saying, I had friends that did not understand this topic, and I gave them the movie, and they get it now. And
I would say the same thing.
I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, it's incredible. A couple of things about that have come up. Will you just share the number of vaccines that are on the schedule for children as compared to whatever year? But will you share a little bit about the comparison and some of the things that I just think are eye-opening? Like,
So one of the things we do is, people that give their children vaccines, like, I got vaccines, I'm just doing what's right. I'm doing the same thing that I had with me. Well, not if you were born before 1986, before that liability protection was brought in. It used to be you could sue the manufacturer. When you could, there was only 10 vaccines on the market.
Until 86, you
until
could
1986,
sue.
you could sue.
Interesting.
And then in 1986, the pharmaceutical industry basically blackmailed Ronald Reagan. They said, we're going to stop making all vaccines unless you protect us from the liability, because they publicly said, we are losing so much money from death and injury lawsuits that we cannot make a profit. I mean, think about that. This was not angel juice. This was a deadly product, and they did not know how to fix it. And instead of fixing it and making it better, they asked for protection from Reagan. And I think the threat and people are like, well, why would Reagan go through with it? Because we were entering the biological weapons age, right? We were no longer afraid as much of nuclear weapons. We were afraid of a biological attack. And Ronald Reagan, the pressure that pharmaceutical industry brought is, hey, if you ever have a terrorist that attacks you with smallpox or something, you better be able to ramp up a vaccine program overnight. You won't be able to do that if we walk away.
So
and that is how they got away. Because I think a lot of people are like, why would Reagan? That's why. He was afraid of being vulnerable, and they used that. So instead of fixing this product, they just said, we'll just stop making it. And he's like, hold on. And we gave total liability protection. So what happened? That's the 1980s. If you look at the 1980s, it's 10 total vaccines by the time you're 18. And our chronic disease rate at that point is 12.8% in our children. 12.8% would have a chronic disease, either a neurological disorder or an autoimmune disease. Then suddenly you take away liability, and it's the gold rush for the vaccine program, and it absolutely explodes. By late 90s, early 2000s, we're up to 54 vaccines. And remember, some of them, like DTaP, is three different things. It ends up being about 72 vaccines, a little different state by state, but roughly 72 vaccines by the time you're 18.
From 10 to 72.
From 10 to 72. And in that same time period, we go from 12.8% chronic disease in our children to 54%. So now more than half of our kids are permanently sick, and either a neurological disorder or an autoimmune disease. And that is just, shocking. Now, people in the audience right now will say, well, I mean, how do you know that's vaccines? That's anecdotal. Mm-hmm. Sure, I totally agree. That's anecdotal evidence. There's several things that we look at. It's something Robert Kennedy Jr. talks a lot about. The EPA did a study on this skyrocketing rate of chronic illness. It all goes back to, EPA targets it back to right around 1994 is where we just see kids just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And there's only a handful of things that enter our environment there. It's glyphosate, which is the herbicide sprayed over 90% of our crops. It's plastics, bisphenols, PFAS, forever chemicals, fire retardants in clothing and bedding that we're putting on our babies, which we don't use anymore. But that's and this vaccine program that explodes. That's about it. And so it's going to be either a combination of those things or one of those things.
Right.
And what I would say to people is, whether it's the pesticides or hormones in our beef or fluoride in our water, like all those things, first of all of those were said to be safe by the FDA. And so that means no matter what it ends up being, they are not exonerated. They have poisoned us. Our regulatory agencies, our health agencies have approved chemicals in our food, chemicals in our environment, things in our water, things in our meats, in our vegetables that we know are poisoning us. And so the blood is on their hands no matter what it ends up being.
Yeah.
But if autoimmune disease is the crisis of our time, which it is, or let's call it immune dysregulation, a confused immune system that is no longer, immune is very interesting when you look at it. All your immune system does is try to determine what is self and what is not self. It's a binary process. It's bumping up. It's bumping up. Our T cells bump against every cell going through our body. And if it finds a foreign protein, alert, attack, kill, get it out. This isn't us. This isn't me. So in this process of vaccinating, we're putting foreign proteins into our body that are supposed to set off this alarm system. But, we're not just doing it one time, right?
Right.
We're not just tricking the immune system one time, sending off this alarm system in an unnatural way. You're not catching the full virus. You're getting a piece of it. It's also attached with aborted fetal DNA that it was grown on when you think of measles. And it has polysorbate 80 and aluminum in some of these vaccines designed to create an inflammatory event in your body to make the reaction even stronger. And so we're creating these strong reactions to viruses and bacteria. And we're not just tricking your immune system one time or 10 times or 20 times or 50 times. 72 times we're now doing this with our children.
While the body's trying to
Literally
grow,
a product. This is my point. Of all the products we may be concerned with, this is the one and only one that is designed to alter your immune system for life. It's designed to trick your immune system into thinking it's had a disease and create a memory of that event. And we do it over and over and over and over and over again. So I'm sorry, it's true. If you look me up online, the one thing they want to make clear is Del is not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. Mm-hmm. Never went to med school, never went near it. I made that clear. But I am a logical person, and I do ask sensible questions. And if our immune system is doing something we've never seen happen in the human body, which is suddenly it's attacking the cells in our own body, it's attacking our heart, it's attacking our pancreas, that's diabetes. It's attacking your myelin sheath around your muscles, multiple sclerosis. It's attacking things in your stomach. You've got, ulcerative colitis and all of this is in our children. Right. I mean, if you look at like Crohn's disease, Crohn's disease, a decade or two ago was considered to be a disease of Ashkenazi Jewish older men. It was very, very specific, and now infants have it. Why? What is happening? That our bodies are fighting ourselves. It's not happening to any other mammal on the planet, not even in this country. There's no dogs or cats or horses having autoimmune disease, only human beings. And so that's why this study is so important. If vaccines are playing a role in this immune disease crisis we find ourselves in, then there would be one easy way to tease it out. Compare vaccinated children to completely unvaccinated children. And what did Dr. Zervos discover in the conclusion of this study? Of 18,500 kids, 2,000 of them are unvaccinated, 16,500 are vaccinated. They studied them both. And amongst the vaccinated, what they discovered is you're 2.5 times more likely to have a chronic disease if you've received at least one vaccine compared to someone that gets none.
At least just one.
Just one. There were kids that only got one and were having issues. And so it got up to, over the time period they looked, 2.5 times more likely to have a chronic disease. When you looked at just neurodevelopmental disorders, things like speech delays and things like that, they were 6 times more likely to have a neurodevelopmental disorder if they'd been vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated, and nearly 6 times more likely to have autoimmune disease if they've been vaccinated. And so I have to make it clear, Henry Ford has sent a cease and desist letter. They've threatened defamation. We've printed their accusation of us on the website, and everyone can watch the film for free at aninconvenientstudy.com. You can download the study there. You can read why Henry Ford thinks what we're doing is incorrect. They claim essentially that our film suggests that the only reason this study wasn't published was because the results were so bad for the vaccinated. They said that is not true. That's defamation. The only reason it wasn't published was it was a bad data and it was a bad study that didn't meet our scientific rigors. They sent that letter, by the way, before the film ever came out. And they sent that letter before they knew that I had footage of the head of their infectious disease department and the lead author on this study saying the exact opposite on the film. Wow. Uncoerced, saying it's a good study, it's an important study. I even asked him, is there any way to do this study better? He's like, I don't know how you could do this study any better, but I'm just not going to publish it because it'll ruin me.
just it's the whole thing. It's so much. There's so much information. There are one or two other things that I think were specific. One of the things that you talked about was NICU. Like there's I don't even
Like
know how to
in
ask
the
the
NICU?
question in NICU. Like
When they give a premium vaccine
and the
on that
result,
part,
like how
yeah.
how even the nurses and the
So
medical profession know.
yeah, so when you talk to neonatal ICU nurses, this is one of the problems of the vaccine program, right? It's a one size fits all. It doesn't care how healthy you are, how big you are, and the hepatitis B vaccine,
Yes.
which is like I think one of the world's stupidest vaccines, and we give it on the first day of life. And let me explain why.
Okay.
It's stupid. First of all, if you want to get into the whole if we want to get in the religious side of this, I do believe this is good and evil and light and darkness. If we're created in the image and likeness of God, do we really feel like, we need to be injected with foreign chemicals to live on his beautiful earth and breathe this air? It's an abomination that we all walked around in masks like God would somehow let a pestilence in the air that we couldn't survive. The whole thing is a little bit hard to handle, but I've said it's gone further than that the pharmaceutical industry is now the most powerful religion in the world. Most people, as soon as they get a diagnosis, will forget they'll go pray, but they'll do whatever their doctor says. And they all even have a new original sin that they've added to our world, which is your baby is born diseased. And your baby needs to be injected with vaccines before they ever even leave the doors of our cathedral that you've given birth in. Hepatitis B vaccine, that's a sexually transmitted disease. So, hello, welcome to God's earth. Gasp for your first beautiful breath, and now we're going to inject you with your first sexually transmitted disease that you will never come in contact with unless you are sharing heroin needles or sleeping with prostitutes. And so you want to talk about Christian families. No Christian family should ever think they need this vaccine unless some random thing like a blood transfusion led to the mother being hepatitis B positive. All right? It's rare. They're out there. But here's what's amazing. We blood test every mother in America before they give birth. So it's not a mystery. We don't have to vaccinate everybody's kids just so that we make sure that we protect that baby that was born to a hepatitis B positive mom. And so that's where the insanity begins, is this hepatitis B vaccine given on day one of life that nobody will need if they live a wholesome life. And even if you don't, the problems you're going to run into aren't going to be happening till, God forbid, you're a teenager.
Right.
Right? Let's wait. Day one, we got some time.
Yeah.
A little time to
we
think
have,
if we're going to really lose our course as parents.
Let's at least
here.
get home.
You know what I
right?
mean?
Yeah.
Let's get home. And so to the NICU story, they give it on day one of life, even if you're premature. Even if you're 2 or 3 months premature born, you're barely surviving. You've somehow come out of the womb early. And you can look up online, there's many NICU nurses that are claiming this, that in our NICU, as soon as they'll go get a crash cart, meaning be prepared for life-saving measures. We're about to give a preemie a Hep B vaccine. They know it flatlines them.
They prep.
They prep for the flatline moment that's sure to come because this baby that's struggling to survive is not going to be capable of handling this aluminum-packed, death shot of hepatitis B that it doesn't even need. And instead of saying something, I'm proud of the nurses that are being honest about this, but it's like, how do you go through with it?
Yeah.
How do you don't just stamp and say, this is sacrilege, we are putting children at risk. And, by the way, we have more babies die on the first day of life in America than every other industrialized nation combined.
Say that again.
We have more babies die on the first day of life in America. We cannot keep our babies alive as well as any other nation in the world. In fact, 50% more babies die in America on day one than all the other nations combined.
Gosh, these statistics,
they're horrible.
They're horrible.
They're horrible.
Statistics.
No doctor should be proud of it. No HHS secretary. Like when I see, the former 6 surgeon generals have all signed a letter coming out against Robert Kennedy Jr. that he's dangerous for science. I was like, the same 6 surgeon generals that oversaw the highest SIDS death rates, day one baby death rates we've ever seen, the greatest decline in human health since the 1980s, going from 12% chronic disease to now 54% chronic disease. Those same surgeon generals, the ones that left the petroleum dyes in our, Fruit Loops while they allowed other countries to ban it, we kept it going. Those same surgeon generals also led lead and arsenic in our baby food. All of these things, which Robert Kennedy Jr. is finally coming and cleaning up their mess. I'll bet they're upset. I'll bet they're getting together because they're going to go down in history as the greatest frauds and shills for industry that the world has ever known. Look how sick we are. CDC just reported 76.4% of adults now have chronic disease.
Yeah.
75% of kids in America could not pass the health requirements to join our military. So this is now a national crisis.
It's a crisis. And I think just for parents who are just trying to do the right thing, right? We're just trying to, I feel the same way about education.
Yeah.
I hear the same thing in education. Well, I graduated and I'm like, we're not on the same planet.
No.
It's like, well, we're not talking about 10, we're talking about 72. We didn't
Yeah.
have glass to make, now we do. It's not apples to apples.
No.
And so we have to just ask the question, the name of the podcast, The Informed Parent, be informed.
That's it.
Informed parents make informed decisions. And so not having the information, it's not a condemnation. It's just like, let's just get the information so that we can make informed decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing these things. If you're going to vaccinate. If you're not.
Yeah.
But you're doing that because you're hoping that you're going to give your child the best chance at a life that's healthy.
Yeah.
That's why you would do it. And so just taking the information and being able to compare it is so, so critical.
Yeah.
I'll tell this one story. I did vaccinate my kids. I wouldn't have thought anything about it. I mean, I didn't. I didn't read all the things because, unfortunately, you trust the authority, or a lot of people trust the authority. You've been taught to trust the authority, and so did. Interesting, not talking to anybody about it, just doing what we all did in my friend group, right?
Yeah.
Family. Until Gardasil came out. And I don't know how my daughter was. She was maybe the oldest, 11 or 12. And they gave me the precursor. When your daughter comes back next year, this is going to be on the market. Or this is going to be the new thing. This is going to be what comes up. And I remember asking a couple of questions, which I had really never done before.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't think, what's it for, cervical cancer? Why is that? Ask the question, sex, the whole thing. And I thought, she's 11 or 12. I'm doing this all by myself in the room. Yeah. And I said, I don't think we're gonna move forward with that. Well, why in the world would I said, well, if we're testing it, if it's a new thing, I think I'll just wait. I think we're not going to be the guinea pig. I mean, it was as simple as that. Didn't think another thing about it till we got back the next year.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I remember you saying that. We're not going to do it. And then, you had the big red mark on the outside of the folder. Like, here she comes. She's one of those moms. Yeah. I was so not one of those moms. Right. I wasn't.
Right.
I just sort of thought for a minute, I just don't know that makes sense. So then, because they kept pushing, then that made me like, what is going on here? I've never been pushed about anything here before.
Right.
Why are you pushing? This is the strangest thing. Fast forward, now I'm one of those moms. They see me coming.
Well, they turned you into one of those moms.
Yeah, I'm not. Now you're bugging me, right?
Yeah,
Now you're being pushy.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to start thinking about this. Well, fast forward to my son, to maybe 2 or 3 years later. He was 2 years younger, and we went in, and they said, "Hey, it's time for your son to get the Gardasil shot." And I said, "What?" And I said, "We don't check the red mark on the folder. Like, we don't do that." And I said, hold on a minute. I thought that shot was I thought that was for cervical cancer, and he doesn't have a cervix. What? I mean, like, this is, I had never, I don't even think I'd had a conversation with my husband about it. You know, I mean, like, this was just Suzanne in a normal life, just doing her thing. And I'm like,
Well, now we think that voicing this, and I said, what are you doing? Like, what is really happening here? And for me, it was the beginning of just starting to learn to ask the questions.
Yeah.
I didn't have a passion around it. It wasn't what I was thinking about in my daily life. It was not that. It was just maybe I need to, in the same way I did with education, maybe I, as the parent, need to stop for a minute and just ask some questions. Maybe I need to read it all. Maybe I don't need to drink the Kool-Aid. And I wasn't even saying the Kool-Aid was poison. It was more the responsibility of saying I don't necessarily just need to roll with it because I've always rolled with it. And it was a wake-up call. I changed the way that we approached even going to the doctor.
Yeah.
I ask questions instead of just following. And so this information, I think, is just so critical to help parents do just that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've really devoted your life to it. So I'm so grateful. I have one other, just as we sort of wrap up, talk about the FOIAs. Talk about what you were doing. Like, you're getting the information out, but there's also a fight to stop some of this. And it's a unique way, I believe, that you found to do this. And I think it's important and an interesting thing to know.
Yeah. So, I said when I started my nonprofit, we got Erin Siri as an attorney who's amazing. And really all the lawsuits, because we couldn't sue the manufacturer, we were going to go after the government. It was actually Erin's really did something that no one had ever thought to do. FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, is really sort of, for people to understand it, the government's our government. We, the people, are in charge. So I can actually put in a FOIA request. I want every email that Tony Fauci ever sent that includes the words, mask, coronavirus, and deadly, right? And they'll do a computer search, and those emails sometimes will be like, that's 2 million emails.
Yep.
Can you refine your search? But you're involved in a process.
Yeah.
But they have to hand you the information. And so a lot of people use FOIAs to find out things that are hidden in the government or studies that you want to know about. Or things
Education. Huge in education. And what's going on. And,
right. Yeah. You could ask, are there any studies that were ever done on dumbing down populations? Is there any studies on how to make students better factory workers, right? I mean, things you might want to know. You could call it conspiracy theory. Let's just see.
Just
and you can do
question.
a search and usually be like, oh my God, there was a conversation between, so that's how that works. Erin had a thought, though, because a lot of this vaccine program is, really gaslighting, right? It's right now. Someone is going to attack this podcast. Swear to God, you'll see comments saying it's not true. They've done placebo-based trials. It's just on the first phase or the earlier versions that you're going to see it all. Not true, but it'll be posted. Doctors stand confidently in it, and I'm telling you, those doctors aren't lying. They just don't know. They were taught.
Right.
They were taught. It just goes way back.
Right.
And they just assume there's no way the professors I trusted got this wrong. I guarantee you they did. Everyone has been building on the same pile of sand that's going on. But what we did was Erin said, we're going to FOIA for things that I'm pretty sure they don't have, that they're saying they have. We have mountains of science that says that vaccines don't cause autism.
Wow.
Right? That's one of the big statements made. So we put in a FOIA request. We would like to see every trial that the CDC relied upon. When you go to the CDC's website and it says across the top on one of the pages, vaccines do not cause autism. It doesn't say MMR vaccine or some vaccine. It says all vaccines
Period.
do not cause autism. And so we said, great, based on that point, will you please provide us every trial you relied upon to establish that the vaccine did not cause autism for the first 6 vaccines of the 16, of the first 6 given in the first 6 months of life? Because if we're diagnosing earlier and earlier, then certainly these early vaccines would be, play into it. And you're saying all vaccines. You're not saying some, all. So give us the trials on the first 6 vaccines. And so this is how this works. They won't answer. They have 30 days to answer. We'll give them 60 days. Then we say, little petition reminder, you are sitting on a FOIA and you're past your time. We need an answer to this. We're just looking for the trials you relied upon to establish that hepatitis B doesn't cause autism, that the polio vaccine doesn't cause autism, that the DTaP vaccine doesn't cause autism. Like, you making that statement, where's the science on that? And eventually they won't answer. And so then we sue. We sue because now you're breaking the law. Now it'd be like your own employee in your place will not give you the information that's, inside your company.
Right.
And so we sue. We take them to court. And then in court, they're like hemming and hawing. We have more court. And like, what do you want? Like, we've been very clear, Judge. We just want any studies, the trials they relied upon
To
for the
make
6
this
vaccines
statement.
to make this statement. And then eventually they came back. I think this case took like a year and a half. Cost a fortune, by the way. It's only possible because of the support that we get. But what happens? At the end of this very long case, they finally come into court and they say, we don't have any trials that meet that specification. We have no trials that say that the first 6 vaccines don't cause autism. Doesn't exist. And so then the judge will turn to Aaron and say, well, there you have it. What do you want us to do? He's like, great. I want a judge's affidavit ordered. Like, basically the judge signs and the CDC signs. We don't have those studies. And we go, great, we'll take that. And that's what we've been doing. And essentially we have broken down this entire mountain of lies. We've won through FOIA
the FOIA
requests.
request.
And say, no, they don't have that. No, they don't have that either. Nope, they've admitted
so brilliant.
that all of this is a house of cards. And it's really unfortunate. And I sit and I think, every time I come to a podcast, for someone hearing this for the first time, it's just got to be, it's so implausible, right? And I've had world-renowned scientists. In fact, that term, Brett Weinstein, who does Dark Horse podcast and is I forget, molecular biologist, at trade, and he argued with me during COVID. He knew the COVID vaccine was bad, but he said the childhood vaccine program's great. And we got into a bit of a little heated at a dinner one night. And I said, look, Brett, you're too smart for this. You're saying something you know nothing about. I know you're going with a strong bravado and assumption. COVID, clearly, I'm glad you're speaking about that vaccine. It's a disaster. But you're going to go and look into this. I know you will. Get back to me when you have. And I'm a journalist. It's got to be annoying. He's a molecular biologist or whatever.
Right.
Like, what do you know? And so, sure enough, like a year and a half or so later, I was in the Kennedy campaign. He came up to me at a Kennedy event, and he said, "I have to apologize." Wow. And I had forgotten. Well, like, what about, Brad? I thought we'd been on stages and done things together since then. And he said, "No, I did what you said I would do. I went and I did an investigation into the entire childhood vaccine program, and he said something that was really fascinating. He said, I'm not one of those people that was under some assumption that vaccines don't injure some people. There's no such thing as a perfectly safe product. I knew injury was real. What I was shocked to discover is that there is no science." From a man who prides himself in science, has a podcast all about science. And that statement did shock me. And he said, "Adele, I want to apologize to you and Bobby. I have put you down. I think I've publicly maybe even said it, that you guys were off track and you stayed in there and you just never gave in." And he said, "Adele, it's just so implausible." As a scientist, to think that we made it this far, 100 years of vaccines at least, and 50 more, 1960s when it really takes off, and all of it was built on
A house of cards.
a house of cards, on assumptions and wishful thinking. And he's like, I don't know how we're going to get people to believe it. That's where we're at. And luckily people are. Luckily, I think the latest poll, 60% of pregnant moms are now saying in a poll that they are not going to follow directly with the CDC schedule. So I mean, they're gonna, they'll probably do some vaccines or space them out. But what they're saying is, I am not going to just bow down
to the schedule,
That's
and maybe
it.
I'm not going to touch it at all.
And, and so it's hard. This information's hard for parent, I think,
It's
or
very
anyone.
hard.
We're already so busy, right? I'm already working, 2 jobs to feed my family, and now I'm checking the car seats and I'm doing the crash tests and I'm looking at strollers, and I've spent a long time on should I be stainless steel bottles or plastic or glass, and like everything you're fretting about, and pots and pans and aluminum, and reading about like the ingredients on food. And I just wanted one part of this process. Can I just hand my baby to my doctor and say this is the one thing I don't, and it's the scariest one, right? I'm not a med student. How do I know what I'm looking for in a vaccine program? And so that's how they've gotten away with it. We've just bowed down and just been so intimidated by the size of what they're involved in. We never ask questions. So all I can say is start by watching An Inconvenient Study. Just go to aninconvenientstudy.com. It's right there. As soon as this is done, that movie, it's riveting. It will blow your mind if you're like, holy cow. I would take a breath. Vaxxed, maybe even more emotional as a film. It's incredible, true stories. And then if the question's alive in you, then then go to the HighWire, and there's so much information out there now. You can start searching it. But
well, incredible. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you for being on the podcast. But it truly is one of the best documentaries I've ever watched. And like I said, I went into it just as a parent. I look back and I think a couple of the health things that are going on with my children, I think as a parent, we so badly don't want to be a part of something that might harm or hurt our parent, and to look at it and have to face it and say, maybe I should have done a little more work, or this is not about condemnation. Let's just move forward. It is not,
and I want to warn people. It does. It's hard. It's hard, and I think it's moving forward.
Yes.
You cannot blame yourself for something that you were lied to about. Right. How was I supposed to know? And by the way, lied to by authority figures, by my news channels, by my own president of the United States that said go out and get this vaccine. Right. So we're allowed forgiveness here, but we cannot be naive, and we cannot hide ourselves from the truth. And I really, to sort of wrap it all up, I give a speech a lot where I start out with Genesis, and you're created in the image and likeness of God, and God tells Adam and Eve, you have everything you ever needed. You have all the water, beautiful, clean running water and air and food and plants and animals. Only one rule. Do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, lest you shall surely die. I remember asking my father, who was a minister, I don't understand what that means. I thought I was supposed to know good and bad. This is different. This is thinking you are like God, that you have the knowledge of God to really decide what's good, what's bad. And I remember him saying, God can count every hair on your head. Don't trust any man that says that they can do that. And I think that's the position we find ourselves in this vaccine program. The vaccine program was man's attempt to make the human body even stronger than it was, to protect us from disease so that we do not get sick. I mean, on one level, beautiful idea. Yeah. And maybe it was a good idea with 2 vaccines, 5, maybe 10, I don't know. But at 72 vaccines, this thing is out of control. The fact that you're not testing it at all, doing no science. So it's not even science, it's a religion itself. And so I'm trading the religion which told me I'm made in the image and likeness of God, and I should never mess with the millions and billions of, maybe I don't know the hairs on my head. Maybe I don't know them. You have 1 million or more bacteria and viruses on your hands right now, and inside of your stomach, bacteria and viruses, some of them deadly, that have all been working in a perfect balance under God's design. And now human beings are going, I'm going to kill one of those. I'm going to kill that one too, and that's going to make you healthier. Really? Really? You can't imagine that maybe you're throwing this entire system out of whack? Because if you can't imagine it, go look at the health of our kids. More than half of them are permanently sick. Lest we shall surely die. We are seeing the fruits of our labor at the moment. And it doesn't look so good.
Thank you so much. Beautiful way to wrap it up. I so appreciate you. I so appreciate the work, and just a powerful conversation. I appreciate you. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you too.
Okay, everyone. Well, I don't have to tell you that was compelling. I mean, I have literally watched the documentary and I was hanging on every word. This is such important conversation. The statistics that he was sharing with them, and that was just a little bit of what you'll see if and when, and I'm saying when you watch the documentary. The statistics are just absolutely compelling. They are statistics. It's unreal. And then when you think about how they're going about the Freedom of Information Acts or the FOIAs, really going through the back door to demand that the content that we're all reading is backed up with facts. It's brilliant. And they're winning these over and over and over again. And y'all, the conversation about the scientist, the one who actually has the information, you heard him say in the interview that part of the deal was no matter what you find, you're going to publish the study. That was the deal. And so when the study comes out and someone makes a decision to not publish, and then says, and it's in the documentary, you watch it, you actually watch the internal struggle of someone knowing the right thing to do, knowing the thing that will help other people, that will stop some of what we're seeing and that increase that he talks about with childhood illness, literally say, I know it's the right thing. I'm just not, this is what he says, I'm not a good person. I'm not going to do it. It is so important that we know where this information is coming from and that we know the truth. I think what Dell has done here is he's just presenting the facts. This has been his passion. He's been in this, you can hear, industry for a very long time. But when this is put together and presented, what it does is exactly what we're talking about on this podcast. Informed parents make informed decisions. How often are we making decisions just assuming that we have the information we need? I did it. I'm not saying I'm completely, a non-vaxxer. What I'm saying is, as parents, we need to be informed. This documentary, this conversation is important for all of us. It's important because it's important for our children's future. And so I hope that you'll watch the documentary. And I hope that just listening to this conversation will help you do this. It will help you parent with purpose and disciple with direction. It'll help you lead an intentional legacy.